Now, what you just saw is really what caused him to be deplatformed, isn't it?
I need to get those inside the church.
And in that way, the conferences, and I quote, that go woke will go broke. Very simple.
For promoting vaccine, we have not promoted that.
That we stand united not to put that issue on the agenda.
In today's video, I'm going to do a reaction to this documentary, which I think deserve a watch because the information is potent. Again, we got to keep talking about these issues, even though it may not always be convenient, because there's some serious injustices that's been done, especially during a time of pestilence 19 and the response of the church. There has to be accountability. There has to be restitutions. There has to be some healing happening. So this is posted by Arnie Sangtag. I'm going to put a link in the description below. I need you to go watch this. Here, you're going to hear the testimony of the individual that Dr. Conrad Vine spoke about in his sermon, that young men, their parents are going to speak up in this video. And we're also going to hear from Arnie Sangtag, his appeal to the GC and the leaders of our church to focus on what the main idea of Dr. Conrad Vine's message was, instead of the money. Right? The main idea is that there's been some serious violation of freedom of conscience of many Seventh-day Adventists by the outcome statement in 2015, which was later on reaffirmed 2020. It had violated the consciences of Seventh-day Adventists in a matter of health decisions, jabs, exemptions, and so on. So the appeal is very strong. And I have to respectfully agree with this appeal when it comes to accountability. Anyway, let's take a listen to Dr. Conrad Vine, and then we're going to listen to Arnie Sangtag in short, and then there goes the testimony of that family as well. So if you enjoyed this video, by the way, make sure you like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more. Let's take a listen.
Let me give you a simple case study that illustrates how this played out in practice. This is a true story. I've seen the paperwork. I've been following this story for 3 years. Many people have written to me with their stories, but this one really stands out. And I have permission from the young man and his mother to tell this story tonight. There is a young man in Australia today. He was a 27-year-old teacher employed by a local conference in the Australian Union as a high school teacher. He graduated from college with an elementary education degree. He graduated with some debts, but by God's grace, he found a job as a high school teacher in an Adventist school. He purchased a home before the pandemic arrived, and he had a mortgage to pay. He was a healthy young man taking much regular exercise. He lived the Adventist health message. He was a healthy young man. Then the pandemic came along, and his employer, the local Adventist conference, required him to take the shots. He was strongly opposed to this on grounds of liberty of conscience and on medical grounds. He had a history of problems with vaccinations. His physician submitted a bona fide medical exemption request, but that was denied by the educational administrator's self-appointed task force. After all avenues for receiving his waiver had been exhausted, and believing he had no choice or he would lose his career and be unable to pay his mortgage and go homeless, this young man succumbed to the pressure and received the AstraZeneca vaccine. Shortly thereafter, he had a massive stroke with an 18mm blood clot to his brain. His neurologist and cardiologist declared it to be idiopathic, which means arising spontaneously or from an obscure or unknown cause, as he was a physically fit and able and active young man who adhered to the Adventist health message and lifestyle. Almost 2 years later, he remains at home, partially paralyzed, unable to engage in work. He has lost his income, he's lost his home. His mother has resigned her nursing job to look after him 24/7 because he now needs nursing care around the clock. The Australian Union and his local conference have turned their backs on him and his repeated requests for assistance. I've read the paperwork, I won't show it here, but essentially they've said, we fulfilled our legal responsibilities, you're on your own. Although they did say to him that if he recovers from the impact of this stroke, of which the cause, they do not know what the cause of that stroke is, they'll be happy to re-employ him as a teacher. That's good and comforting news for him. Well, remember he took the AstraZeneca vaccine? In 22, the AstraZeneca vaccine had already been banned in many countries around the world because it causes brain bleeds. In spring of 23, much to this young man's chagrin, the Australian government banned the AstraZeneca shots nationwide because they were determined to be linked with brain bleeds and strokes, as this man had experienced. And finally, in May 2024, AstraZeneca withdrew their vaccines worldwide after admitting in a UK court the relationship between with brain bleeds and strokes. That which was safe and effective, officially, that which was mandated by our church administrators, with calamitous effect, was then banned overnight by the Australian government precisely because it was not safe and effective. So far, the conference and the Australian Union have denied any and all responsibility for their part in this mess. The structure sails on, leaving broken bodies, destroyed lives, and betrayed trust in its wake. And nobody seems to care. But this is wrong. This is profoundly wrong. This is a human case study of what happens when church administrators overstep their boundaries and deny members the ability to follow the dictates on the conscience of the Holy Spirit. And the hierarchy just sails on as if nothing has happened, leaving broken bodies and destroyed lives in its wake. This is what happens when our GC administrators make illegitimate decisions, overstep their defined boundaries of delegated authority, and assume the right to trample on liberty of conscience. Had that man's request for a religious exemption been honored, he would still be working today. But his life has been destroyed by the actions of those administrators. Personally, the statement will get me into trouble. I believe that every General Conference administrator who was party to that reaffirmation statement should resign immediately because they overstep their authority with catastrophic impact on the lives of innocent Adventists worldwide. Amen. I think they should resign. Amen. They no longer have our confidence.
All right, before we go to the next part of the video, that was the message that I think there's been a overreaction from many of our leaders in the GC and many others like Stephen Bohr and Jim Machef from the Michigan Conference and everything else, even the Audioverse. They quickly wanted to censor Dr. Conrad Vine because of his call to the parachurch movement, right? And we can have a lot of discussions about this. We can whether or not asking how does that look like and so on, how is this going to be implemented and stuff like that. But it's crazy to me that is the focus. The message, the heart of the message is liberty of conscience. And the people that have been left behind and injured, these individuals are completely neglected. So when you hear them, when I hear the response about the money, and not so much of a response to support the families who've been hurting, who were left completely unaddressed, I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that because to me, it's like, do you care about the pain of these individuals, or do you care so much more about the financial status of the church? And some of us would say, yeah, we already know what the answer is to that. And so Annie Sentag is going to bring the family here. And again, he's going to speak a little bit, and then he's going to bring the family to share a testimony about the nature of what Conrad Vine has spoken about. Let's keep listening.
Now, what you just saw is really what caused him to be deplatformed, isn't it? It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. They would rather contend with each other over ties and organizational structures. That's more important than people's lives, evidently. There sure seems to be plenty of time for them to engage in that. Tell me, how does this look to a world we're trying to win over with our message? Our leaders and those supporting their incredibly disturbing silence on this issue need to come out of their stupor. The impression more and more people are beginning to form, despite protestations to the contrary, is that our leadership, professed Christians, simply don't care about the main issue that started all of this. They and those who engage in the ongoing debate about tithe and church organization and all these other matters, honestly, they're trampling all over the lives of those who have already suffered enough. Quite frankly, it's sickening. It's becoming clear, even to those outside the church, that our leaders have embraced science, so-called, over the principles of religious liberty that our church is supposed to uphold. This perspective has put the lives of many in our church in complete disarray. I'm talking about the lives of people like Dominic and Christy Rosina, whose son Dr. Vine referenced in his message to illustrate the kind of damage that stonewalling the issue has done. Did any of those now condemning Dr. Vine actually hear what he had to say about the Rosinas? Or were they too busy looking for a way to take him down like the Pharisees frequently tried to do with Jesus? What went through their minds? Oh, that's just too bad about those people, but we just need to move on. We have more important issues to talk about, like the tithe and parachurch organizations. The sad truth is that the Rosinas were treated terribly by pastors and administrators in their own conference, even after their son was seriously injured by the vaccine. Here's just a small glimpse of the obvious suffering the Rosinas experienced. It's a clip taken from a Zoom meeting held in Australia by a group of concerned Seventh-day Adventists.
Daniel was going to the gym at the time, and that's where he suffered the stroke.
I'm jumping.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell you, I received a call at 4:00 in the afternoon. It was a call from Daniel. I answered the phone. I was like, "Hey, Daniel." And it was a lady from the gym. And she said, "Your son's at the gym. He's had a stroke. The paramedics are here. They can't understand what's happened. All his vitals are fine. Is he on any medication? Does he take anything?" I said, "No, my son's perfectly healthy. He's never had any problems. He doesn't take any medication." And she said, "Get yourself to Concord Hospital. Just get yourself there." So we go to Concord Hospital, and they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us in. And it was just by a miracle from God that we both managed to get into. Anyway, we managed to get into the hospital.
I think we can all understand what you've got going through. Or understand at least a bit of it. And it's just the most terrible thing to have to face up to.
And anyway, we both go in there, and they said, "Look, we don't know if your son will make it because he has such a large clot in his brain. It's 18 millimeters. We've got to transfer him to RPA." And when we went in, our son's arm was hanging off the stretcher, lifeless. His eyes were rolling. One eye was just rolling around in circles over and over. And we just went to his bed and we prayed for him. And we just said, "Daniel, you're going to be okay. God's with you, you know?" And anyway, they just explained everything to us, and they said, "Look, highly likely that he might not make it, but we have to do certain things. Do you consent?" We said yes. And then they said, "Okay, we're transferring him to RPA. We need to go there." And they had to do a medical procedure to go through his groin, up to his brain to remove this massive clot, you know?
4 times.
Yeah, 4 times they had to go and try to remove the clot from his brain. Now, when we got to RPA, we were told that they would let us in to see him. And when we got there, they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us in to see our son.
To share this. I don't think God has left us through all this. I believe I could see God's hand and no matter how painful it's been, we're not bitter towards them, even though I think what they've done was criminal. I'm talking about our church administration. I believe they were cruel, and there's more things that they did later that really revealed to me that this is a serious issue that we never want to repeat again. Our son is still doing rehabilitation, and he does
work.
He can't work. It's been over 2 years. He still can't use his hand. He's able to manage to walk now and able to shower himself, and I thank God for that. You know, I do want to say through all this that I do thank God that I know that He hasn't abandoned our son. I know He has not abandoned my wife and I through this process. And there have been people in our church that have been supportive to us. But we have not felt any support from any of the administration that we were close to. Some of those people, and I'll just say this, I was appointed a lay pastor of our church. And when I say lay, they did, anyway, that's another issue. But I knew these people closely, and especially the union president at this point, I knew him very closely. And he never ever called me through this whole process until he had to come and preach at our church, which was in February this year.
Wow. I mean, this is a sad reality, man. You know, the response from the church, the leadership of the church toward these families is terrible. It's terrible. I've also heard that there are other cases where they took the jab and were injured. They were taken care of. I've heard people sharing stuff like that, but it also depends on the level of relationship you have in the administration as well. But families like the Christies, it's just not okay. I'm trying to platform them. I'm trying to figure out a way to get in touch with them. So if any of you know, I found a Facebook page that has their names, but I'm not sure. I sent a message just to ask, but if you guys have contact with this family, I would like to platform them and give them a voice. I think their story need to be heard. Others need to come to hear what they've been through, and that message has to go all the way to the top. So they've tried everything they could as far as contacting all the leaders in every way possible, education, administration, and everything. They were pretty much stonewalled. So I think their voices have to be heard, their story has to be told, and restitution has to be made. There has to be an apology. There has to be some cleaning up. It's just what it is. Now, some people can say, well, that was his decision to make, but the pressure was on. The statement that was written made it impossible to get a vaccine exemption. So I will not blame the victim. I will be very careful to blame the victim here, because it's very obvious that our church did not make the right decision during those times. We can simply admit that and find ways to hold leaders accountable so that those broken bodies and people who's been wounded and hurt. And I've also heard many people in the chat, I've said similar story. I've shared similar things. Their pain have to be acknowledged. I think the lack of compassion and that failure to look within and realize the reality of what has happened during that time and how many bodies are left behind unattended for, I think is just not Christian. It's just not. It's not the way Jesus ever intended for us to behave, especially at the very top of our leadership. So I'm really hoping stories like this, bringing those to the channel, it will sound an alarm. It will go far and wide. So if you're watching this video, can you please give this video a thumbs up? Comment in the description whether you agree or disagree. Comment below. When you do stuff like that, it pushes the video into the algorithm, and this is how he gets to people who could really make a difference. And also these voices, when they are platformed, they get their stories are being heard, perspective or change. We can speak and hold leaders accountable and vote differently, so that we can change these circumstances in the church by the grace of God. This is one of the ways you address it, is by sounding the alarm. Anyway, I pray, I hope, can we pray for this family? For those of you who are watching, pray for this family, and I will be doing the same, that the Lord will continue to provide for their means. And pray for Daniel, who had experienced this tragic, I could only imagine. Pray for him, and pray for our leaders to repent and come to the knowledge of the truth. And I know there's a lot of things that there could be financial stuff, there could be other policies and other legal reasons for not willing to speak up and apologize and make restitutions. But something has to be done, because nothing is more divisive in the Adventist Church today than the result of the decisions that was made during the time of Pestilence 19 and the many bodies that are left unattended and uncared for. That's the greater division we need to worry about. Yeah, we can talk about this and that and heresy and yada yada. We can talk about Conward Vine all you want to do, if you want to do that. But this situation here is the type of situation that would rip the church apart. And I don't want this for my church. I don't want this for the Adventist Church. I know we have a purpose and a calling, and we are a people. We have hope. We have a powerful message, but we do have some serious issues that we cannot overlook. So please pray for these families, that the Lord will give them justice. Thank you once again for listening. Like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more. I'm gonna provide the link to the full interview in the description below, and the documentary by Arnie Sontag, the president of Walk of Faith Ministry. And if there's any way you guys can get me in touch with these families, it will be awesome, because I will platform them. Their story needs to be heard. Anyway, thank you for listening. God bless you. Have a good one. Bye.